Anderson starts now.
And good evening to you. 79 years ago today, the country was reeling from the loss of 2,403 American lives at Pearl Harbor. Those deaths stunned the nation. There was understandable outrage and fury over the attack. President Roosevelt declared war on Japan the next day, called it a date which will live in infamy. 2,403 American deaths at Pearl Harbor. Right now, the United States is averaging more than 2,200 COVID deaths a day. That's nearly one Pearl Harbor every 24 hours. By April of next year, the University of Washington's Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation projects the pandemic will have killed upwards of 100,000 more people in this country than all the American troops killed in 3.5 years of the Second World War. More than 500,000 dead. President Trump is the one who likened this to a war. He called himself, in fact, a wartime president. But that was a long time ago. Those were in the days when he wanted to be seen as a commander-in-chief leading the effort, when he took over the coronavirus press briefings and then stopped listening to the doctors who actually knew what they were doing. Now, the president doesn't seem concerned about being a wartime commander. If anything, he seems more like a deserter. He's absent. The American people have given him leave, voting him out of the ballot box, but he still has some weeks left. He has chosen to go AWOL. He's declined to join the fight against COVID. He's not rallying anyone to wear masks. He's not talking about our dead, our hurt, our fear. Yeah, it has been that way for months, I know, but it is particularly galling given so many of us are now sick and dying. December 8th, 1941, President Roosevelt said, and I'm quoting here, "There is no blinking at the fact that our people, our territory, and our interests are in grave danger." He was spelling it out for us. August 14th, 2020, is what this president told Bob Woodward.
Nothing more could have been done. Nothing more could have been done. Well, I acted early.
It was not just a declaration of surrender, but a justification for having already surrendered months before. Worse, unlike FDR, this president did not make it in front of Congress. His words came in a private conversation. He didn't have the courage or the decency to tell the American people the truth that he was forfeiting. As far as he was concerned, he'd already done all he could, already checked out. Since then, another 115,000 of our fellow Americans, many of whom supported and voted for the president as if that should even matter, but to him, you would think it might, have died of coronavirus. As of tonight, the count now stands at more than 283,000, with nearly 1,300 deaths reported just today. On Friday, the president signed an order proclaiming today National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. It reads in part, "We solemnly honor and uphold the memory of the patriots who lost their lives that day." He had nothing to say, however, about the 2,879 Americans reported dead in this country of COVID the night before he signed that proclamation. Nor did he speak of the dead at his largely maskless rally in Georgia the very next day. How many of them might have survived if more had been done, if more of us wore masks, social distance, if the president really was a wartime commander? Instead, he claims nothing more could have been done. And look at the shot there. See how most of the people behind him are not wearing masks? You may recall that is different than what you'd see when he was on the campaign trail, when he still hoped to get your vote before he lost the election. The campaign used to put people with masks behind him to at least pretend that they cared. In fact, they would give them masks often if they didn't have masks of their own. They were pretending to do the right thing. They're not even pretending to care anymore. It is now every man and woman for themselves. And look, that's the way it's always been with this president and the people he's chosen to surround himself with. But it's more clearer than ever. As for the dead, the only dead the president spoke of were the ones in his fantasies about the election he lost.
We know the Democrats will have dead people voting, and you got to watch it. Dead people, you wouldn't believe how many.
Sure, that's how he speaks of dead people. He speaks lies of fake dead people and says nothing about those who have died on his failed watch. He said nothing about the dead who might have voted if COVID hadn't taken them, nearly 1,600 deaths reported on Election Day. He and the people around him just don't care anymore. They're looking for other jobs, as we've been reporting, looking to see how they can maybe salvage what's left of their reputations. while the president is certainly pondering his next moves and raking in a whole lot of money to let him use as he'd like, by claiming it's going to be for his battle against the election fraud that never was. Take a look at a ceremony today at the White House, the Medal of Freedom. Hardly a mask to be seen, nor any distance to be had between the guests. The president, as you know, has boasted of being immune to the virus. As for everyone else, does it look like he cares? He certainly cares about getting credit for the vaccine. Less than a week after the election, he tweeted, quote, "As I had long said, Pfizer and the others would only announce a vaccine after the election because they didn't have the courage to do it before." When it comes to the vaccine, which is as far as his interest seems to extend, late today, the New York Times reported that the administration in late summer actually turned down the chance to buy more doses from Pfizer, which would have meant more vaccines available on day one. The administration denies it. The vaccine could receive emergency use approval in a matter of days, but the president shows no interest in doing or even saying anything that might keep more people alive to get it. Certainly not helping the incoming Biden administration as much as they could. Not now, and perhaps not even up until inauguration. Not in August when he told Bob Woodward that nothing more could have been done. Not in April, months after he told Woodward the virus was airborne and far deadlier than the flu.
So it's voluntary. You don't have to do it. They suggest it for a period of time, but this is voluntary. I don't think I'm going to be doing it. I just don't want to be doing, I don't know, somehow sitting in the Oval Office behind that beautiful Resolute desk, the great Resolute desk. I think wearing a face mask as I greet presidents, prime ministers, dictators, kings, queens. I don't know. Somehow I don't see it for myself. I just don't.
Yeah, doesn't look good. Huffing and puffing after getting off a helicopter after having left the hospital early after having COVID, that apparently is presidential in this president's mind. But actually just wearing a thin piece of fabric over your mouth and over your nose to protect others, that is somehow not something he can do. The self-proclaimed wartime president already announcing the terms of surrender in a war he never cared to fight because he could see nothing in it for himself. Not even the credit for saving lives just by putting a piece of cloth over his face. Nearly 1,400 Americans died that day, a fact alone which ought to live in infamy. President-elect Biden named members of his health team today. Javier Becerra is HHS Secretary, former Surgeon General. Dr. Vivek Murthy returns to that post. Dr. Anthony Fauci will serve as Chief Medical Advisor. Joining us now is New York Times foreign affairs columnist Tom Friedman. Recently spoke with the president-elect. He is, as you know, author of too many bestsellers to count, including The Lexus and The Olive Tree, Understanding Globalization. Tom, public health experts warned the pandemic would worsen as the weather got colder. Political experts insisted President Trump wouldn't take well to losing. Still, though, does it feel worse, the gross tonnage of all this? Does it feel in some ways darker than the worst fears? I mean, the idea that we are close to the numbers of the pandemic of 1918 is just extraordinary.
You know, Anderson, listening to your introduction and thinking about the president's behavior, it's like he's telling the country, I demand the right not to lead you. Yeah. I mean, what is he fighting for in this election? You know, I demand the right not to lead you. This is possibly one of the greatest leadership challenges and moments in our country's history. This is the greatest public health crisis we've ever faced. And the fact that he won't take charge, the fact that he won't help Biden, it's despicable for all the reasons you said, Anderson. But the thing that makes it to me the most troubling, just the most despicable, don't do it for yourself. Okay, don't do it for your party. Don't do it for me, but do it for the healthcare workers, the doctors and the nurses.
Exactly.
Manning the front lines in hospitals, and clinics, and nursing homes. When you don't wear a mask for whatever reason, what you're doing is you're raising the exposure of yourself and other people that are going to put you in a hospital, in an emergency room, and expose these people. And they're already burned out. We know that. So do it, if not for him, for me, for you, do it for the doctors and nurses, because we're about to enter a 2-month period. Every expert is telling us that. I think, Anderson, we can't imagine. It's going to be unlike any period in our history. And the pressure it's going to put on hospitals and doctors and nurses is going to be just excruciating. So stop being a pig and do it for them.
And I mean, you know, I've said this on the program before, but we did some reporting in Niger during a malnutrition crisis. There was a doctor from Doctors Without Borders, Milton Tectonitis, and he was talking about children dying from malnutrition and dying of things that an antibiotic that cost 25 cents would save their life from, but it just wasn't accessible to their parents. And he called it stupid deaths that did not need to occur. Many of these deaths do not need to occur. I mean, if we had done more, myself included, if we had worn masks more and social distance more and done more and rallied together as a nation, which is something we used to be able to do. And I don't understand that, given all this calamity, that why we cannot right now rally as a nation.
Well, that is the saddest thing, because big hard things can only be done together. This is the biggest, hardest public health challenge we've ever faced. It is a moment that not only cries out for leadership, but history would so reward leadership by a president who actually put everything down and said, you know what, I get it. Forget the election. Forget party. Right now, I have one job: to pull us together. And again, it was never mass or sporting events, mask or restaurants, mask or work. There's always mask for sporting events, mask for restaurants. And that's the maddening thing, is that it's precisely by wearing a mask, doing the smart things, we'd actually allow the economy to come back sooner, faster, bigger. And it's just the unwillingness it's just the insistence on my right to be dumb as I want to be. I can be dumb as I want to be. And unfortunately, that mood, that attitude has been harming our country for a while now.
No. As I mentioned, you recently interviewed President-elect Biden. You wrote in the Times that he seemed cautiously optimistic.
And the reason why that it strikes such of a harmony in our country right now is because we have had so many people that's been affected by becoming infected by drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and drug abuse. And because of it, their thinking is not considered normal. Some of them who has gotten off the drugs, to some extent, has healed up a little bit, but they'll never gain the full velocity of what their brain was capable of after becoming infected with so many narcotic type drugs, regardless whether it was Oxycontins, Darvons, crystal meth, cocaine, heroin. I could go down a long list of what people does that affects their thinking. And even though they may have been fortunate enough to gotten off of it, they will never meet their full potential unless there is spiritual intervention. If there is spiritual intervention, then there's a possibility that that person can meet their potential of what that they was going to do in life before they ever become contaminated with that type of narcotic. It does that kind of irreversible damage. So because of the people being acceptable in this movement, in this era, at this time, makes the things that Donald Trump does even more effective. But the bad thing about it is it's effective in a negative way and not a positive way. Donald Trump could have been the hero instead of the zero throughout all of this. If he would have got down and dirty right there with the doctors and the scientists on the get-go towards expressing and explaining to the general public how dangerous, how lethal that this disease is. I truly believe, and I will always believe, that it could have possibly saved thousands and thousands and thousands of lives, to the point that we wouldn't have got blindsided. We wouldn't have got caught, like the little woman said, with your pants down. We would have been more prepared. We have one of the greatest challenges in our era that we've had in the past 100 years. The thing about the people during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, people was not susceptible to all these different chemicals and all these different types of drugs. Back then, the big thing was booze, alcohol, white lightning, moonshine. There may have been a few people that was ritzy enough that got their hands on cocaine during that period, but by and large, most people had straight minds. Look how devastating it was to that society then. And I realize, and most other people do too as well, that we didn't have near the protection in our medical arena back then, 100 years ago, versus what we have today, pertaining to respirators, ventilators, knowing what types of drugs does this and what types of drugs does that. That may be so. But on the other hand, the human anatomy has not changed. We still got 10 toes, 10 fingers, 2 hands, and 2 feet. We got a head and a body. We've got different organs that respond and react the same today as they did not only 100 years ago, but 1,000 years ago. Not only 1,000 years ago, but 6,000 years ago. We are still in a human vessel form, if you follow my line of thinking. And even though the medical may have advanced, so has also the disease. And because of it, it makes it 10 times harder to be able to treat certain patients. Now, whenever all this first broke out, I was watching it very, very carefully and watching national news. A lot of people don't watch news. And a lot of people that do watch news only watch local news. They're unconcerned about national news. Then there's a few people out there like me, that's news buffs, that want to watch all kinds of news, especially national news. So whenever this all first broke out, I was on top of things in regards to this pandemic. Whenever it first broke out, I had already bought 4 boxes of masks, surgical masks. And just within a matter of a week, maybe a few days, they was no longer available. All masks, whatever mask that was out there, was going to the first responders, in which by rights, that's the way that it should have been. But I'm just trying to make a point, is that we as a society here in America got caught with our pants down, as the little lady used to say. As the little old woman said, well, you got caught with your pants down. Well, America did. Especially whenever you add 2 and 2 together, and if you got any capability of reading and understanding the Bible at all, whenever you read the Bible and it talks about how that he will throw us off into a sick bed unless we repent of our sins and get our lives right, you had to recognize that some sort of serious sickness was going to befalling upon to humanity on this scale and on this level eventually. I mean, there's no doubt we was a sick nation before the coronavirus ever hit. Tuberculosis, cancer, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, Lou Gehrig's disease. I could go on and on with different types of diseases, including AIDS, that literally has ravaged the land in some form, in one form or another. Even Alzheimer's. They call it dementia. That's a disease to where people literally start forgetting who they are. They literally start forgetting where they are. That is a disease that affects the mind. A disease that was already wreaking havoc upon society, not just here in America, but all over the planet, before COVID ever hit the way that it hit. So you have to put two and two together whenever you read the first 4 chapters of Revelations, by understanding whenever God was talking to the churches then, he's talking to the churches now, today. That he has not yet found our works perfect yet. To go back and do thy first works over again. And if we didn't do that, he would throw us off into a sick bed. He will put in the sickle because the grapes or the harvest has come. You got to analyze the Bible in the truest form of the way that they used different metaphors to express what that they was talking about back then. You know, whenever it talks about the vineyard being ripe. Well, at that time, whenever the writer wrote that, he really didn't have no other concept to go by other than knowing what a vineyard was. So they throw that in there for an example. That way, maybe whoever reads it can understand that whenever the grape vineyard is ripe, that's whenever you go in and you pick all the grapes. That way you can make jellies and jams and wine and whatever else that you want to make from the vineyard. God was using that as an illustration of a metaphor towards the human beings upon to the planet. We've got over 7, almost 8 billion people on the planet. In some places, they have reached a level to where it's almost unsustainable. And whenever you look at the drug culture, self-induced poverty level countries like down in South America or Mexico or other places in the world, it's just horrible to think how that this disease is wreaking havoc upon to those type of environments right now that goes beyond comprehension. I just seen a thing a while ago in Venezuela or Honduras in South America, and it was just absolutely, it brought tears to my eyes to think how badly that they're being affected right now because of the coronavirus. If we think that we're having it bad right now, you need to turn on other newses and look at what other people are going through in other countries. If you think that we're going through bad stuff, trust me, we still got automobiles. We still got highways to go up and down. We can still go to the grocery store and get basically whatever that we want. It could be 1,000 times worse right now if we was at the wrong place with the wrong group of people. The Bible's very clear in stating how that he would basically allow for Satan to go forth wreaking havoc upon to society right now, because he has lifted that umbrella of protection from us. And the reason why that he has done this is because we have basically bitten the hand that was feeding us. And if you continue to bite the hand that is feeding you, eventually the hand will either smite you or it will just quit feeding you. Well, the protection that the Heavenly Father was substantiating in the planet or on the planet pertaining to protecting humanity, he has lifted that to a certain degree to where now Satan is reigning. Satan is basically wreaking havoc upon the society, and it's not just coming in the form of tragic gun incidences pertaining to a mass shooter of a massacre, but now it's coming in the form of every direction you can think of. We are under siege. And to have a president like Donald Trump is probably one of the worst times that America could have a president, or any country to have anybody with that type of fortitude like Donald Trump. It would be one of the worst times for that group of people to have somebody like that. One of the worst. And as things progressively gets worse, and as we continue to dissect, analyze, and to some degree try to make sense out of some of the things that Donald Trump does, as well as some of the things that Donald Trump says, in dissecting his demeanor, more and more people are going to wake up to just exactly what type of monster that Donald Trump is. What Donald Trump done towards declaring the World War II day of December the 7th, or leading into December the 8th, whenever Roosevelt made his speech, was a good thing. There's nothing wrong with what he done. That's a good thing towards making a declaration. But to hear this commentator talk, there's so many other things that he didn't do. There's so many other things that he didn't say. There's so many areas that he didn't cover. And he's supposed to be the one that we look up to for insurance. He's the one that's supposed to inspire us. He's the one that's supposed to give us hope. He's the one that's supposed to motivate his people pertaining to morale. He's the one that was supposed to have not cut us short in supplies and in telling us how lethal that this. I mean, if we'd all known what we know now, we could have made our own masks and doubled or tripled the cloth to the point that it would have been the next thing to a surgical mask as far as keeping biological germ warfare out of us, out of our bodies. But now it's too late for that. It's too late for that. And of course, Donald Trump, because of pride, will probably, I ain't saying this for sure, but will probably try to excuse it and push it off to the side, hoping that it will be out of sight, out of mind, and won't nobody recognize that he's not addressing his people the way that he's supposed to be addressing his people, as a motivator, a leader, an example. That's what the commentator, and that's what this individual right now is trying to say.
Think about what he and the administration can accomplish. He also said that he told you he's felt, quote, no moment of elation. I'm wondering what your sense of what he believes he can actually get done in the short term. I mean, he mentioned to Jake Tapper that he'll ask Americans to wear masks for 100 days. Beyond that, though, what do you think the early part of a Biden administration looks like? I would imagine a fair amount of executive orders, given what this President Trump has done. I don't know. What do you foresee?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things that really struck me in talking to the president-elect Anderson. One is the simple fact that we are so lucky that we now have, as our president, about to take over, a person who is impossible to hate after 4 years of a hate-filled presidency that has so divided the country. Biden's impossible to hate. And I think that's going to be very important. It's going to enable him to reach out to a lot of other Americans who did not vote for him. At the same time, he is so clearly surrounding himself with really high quality people. I know Vivek Murthy very well. Who's going to be Surgeon General. He's just a wonderful person. These are really high quality people. And I think what I'm hoping for, Anderson, is that there's nothing like the bully pulpit of the presidency. And we've seen how destructive the bully pulpit of the presidency can be when you have a bully in the pulpit. But when you have someone who is soft-spoken, who's not in your face, who is trying to pull people together, I do hope that after January 20th, that he will model the right behavior and that it will inspire, not everyone, but more Americans to start doing the right thing. I was so struck, Anderson, in the comments on my column in the New York Times, how many people wrote in and just said, wow, I forgot what it's like to listen to a president who speaks so thoughtfully, so carefully about issues, who isn't exclaiming his perfection and dividing the country and decrying fake news, that just the sobriety of the conversation, people forgot what normal is like.
Yeah, and one of the things he told you was that he thinks much of the ugliness that's defined the Trump era will disappear when President Trump is no longer in office. Clearly, President Trump is going to attempt to stay in the headlines as much as possible. Whatever network he ends up, doing whatever he's going to do on, obviously Twitter, things like that. He'll maybe start merchandising stuff, make paid speeches to people who admire him. He's going to do everything he can. Do you think that that he will be able to maintain the sort of the grip he has on so many people, or out of office he'll just be a carnival barker like so many other people on talk radio?
We talked about this, I think, once before, Anderson, where I pointed out that former Secretary of State Jim Baker used to joke that how do you know you're out of power in Washington? It's when your limousine is yellow and your driver speaks Farsi. Okay, so when you're and so what none of us know is what will Trump's grip on that party be when his limousine is yellow and his driver speaks Farsi, when he's out of power. And I think that's actually, Anderson, what he's afraid of most, because Trump understands power and he is terrified that the phone calls won't be answered so quickly, that maybe the access to Fox News won't be so great. But the real culprit here, and the truly shocking thing beyond his behavior, is that at this point in this election and at this point in this pandemic, there aren't 5, 10 Republican senators who just say, enough, sorry. This election is over. This pandemic hasn't even begun to crest. And I am not participating in this farce any longer. Yeah. You say 5, 10? That not one. When you think of people like Solzhenitsyn and Sakharov, who were ready to go to prison to suffer the worst, pain in defense of human rights, and these people won't give up their free parking place at National Airport to do the right thing. It is so shameful, and that's why I hope that when this is over, that some Americans do come up to them on the street and say, when it was Trump versus the Constitution, were you really with Trump? Were you really with Trump? What the hell was that about?
Tom Friedman.
It's dehumanizing. It's bewildering and it's dehumanizing. To think that somebody could be that callous and that cold and out of touch, out of sync with what's actually occurring right now, with thousands and thousands of deaths that's happening every day. I don't I don't think I got the right words to express the category that he has put himself in, that eventually there'll be enough of us that will wake up, that will rattle the rest of us to say, you know what? This is where we are. This is what's happening to us. This isn't fictitious. It's not a fantasy. It's not our imaginations running wild. We didn't have a bad dream. We're not delirious or delusional. This is where we are as a society. Of course, a lot of us are going to wake up too late.
I appreciate it as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Anderson.
There's breaking news now on just how far the president will go to win, no matter what the voters actually chose. The headline up just now on the Washington Post website reads, Trump asked Pennsylvania House Speaker for help overturning election results, personally intervening in a third state. CNN political analyst Josh Dawsey shares the byline. He joins us now by phone. So, Josh, explain what you've learned.
Yeah, President Trump called the Speaker of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives twice during the past week to lean on him about reversing his loss in the state. Speaker of the House's office confirmed these calls to us on the record and said, the president, said, I'm hearing about all these issues in Philadelphia, all these issues with your law. What can we do to fix it? And the Speaker of the Pennsylvania House said that he had no power to overturn the state's chosen slate of the electors for the Electoral College vote next week. This comes after, the president has repeatedly called Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, to try and exert pressure there, and met at the White House with top lawmakers in Michigan to try and exert pressure in that state. So far, none of the entreaties have seemed to work.
So was that the Pennsylvania State Speaker's final response to the president? Because if you said there were two calls, I'm wondering, once he says I can't do anything, is there a need for another call?
I think the president called back with new information, is our understanding, and at both times the speaker, his spokesperson said the speaker said, we're not, we don't have any power for that. We can't change that. There've been a number of lawmakers in Pennsylvania, Republican lawmakers, who have agreed to sign on to the president's effort, dozens of them now. But the Speaker of the House so far is not going along with it. And, as it stands right now, the president has some supporters in each of these states, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, who have been supportive of his causes, but it's not nearly enough to make a difference and turn any of these states in the way he would want them to go.
Has there been a response from the White House over the reporting?
The White House declined to comment on either one of the calls, but the White House has not made any secret of the fact that the president is working on this. I mean, he recently said during one of his appearances, Anderson, that he's working on this harder than he's ever worked on anything in his life, and he's skipping a lot of the Christmas parties. He's not really doing public events. He doesn't have intelligence briefings on his schedule, coronavirus briefings on his schedule. He's spending most of his day obsessing about voter fraud and trying to stop what seems to be inevitable from happening.
Yeah, well, if that's the hardest he's ever worked, then wow, we've been in more trouble than we didn't realize.
That's what he said. Those are the words
I know, but it's very telling that he believes this is the hardest he's been working, not getting intelligence briefings, not going to coronavirus task force briefings, which we know he hasn't gone to for a long, long time. But wow.
Well, what Tom Friedman was just saying there, and it's interesting. He's saying that some of these Republican senators should stand up, and there's a lot of pressure on them to do that. What's interesting is the president has exerted significant pressure now on Republicans and states across the country, 4 or 5 different states now, where there's been evidence that he or Giuliani or Jenna Ellis or some other campaign emissary has tried to, stop, kind of just the Democratic wheel from moving along. And so far, he said no success in any of these states.
Yeah. Well, the system's working so far. Josh Dawsey, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Coming up next, more breaking news from the White House on the subject, as well as the president's desire to go back down to Georgia to fight for 2 Republican senators in control of the Senate. Also, one of the challengers, Jon Ossoff, weighs in on the debate he had with literally nobody His opponent, Perdue, wouldn't show up. Later, the Michigan official, who was surrounded by an armed crowd outside her home simply for doing her job.
Dead people voting, people that don't live there.
From the makers of top-selling Super Beats comes new Super...
What?
With Michigan's Secretary of State over the weekend, yelling because Michigan certified President-elect Biden's victory over President Trump by more than 146,000 votes because that's how many votes he won by. Up next, I'll talk with Jocelyn Benson about what happened and what it means going forward.
Accept a complete. Hi.
Wow. So sad. Good luck to us all. Shalom to my viewers. God bless.